Al-Qassam Brigade spokesperson Abu Ubaidah declared today that they lost contact with the team that was protecting Aidan Alexander, an American Israeli who participated in the Israeli terror forces and was taken into Gaza. Aidan Alexander is someone that Donald Trump has been talking about recently. As a matter of fact, the United States of America has been negotiating with Hamas directly for the release of Aidan Alexander without Israel included. When Adam Bowler was directly negotiating with Hamas and when they tried to release this person. Hamas, from their end, they released 2 videos previously of Aidan Alexander, and now they are saying that they lost contact with the team that was protecting Aidan Alexander. What does that mean? Where are things going? We're going to talk about this and a couple of other things to do with the increase in the refusal inside of Israel, alongside a couple of other updates tonight. But Abu Ubaidah, the spokesperson of Al-Qassam, said, we lost contact with the group that captured the soldier Aidan Alexander, soldier participating in the Israeli army. What does that mean, losing contact with them? And is there any hope for Aidan Alexander? Well, this is something that happened multiple times previously. And in most cases, you are talking about a confirmed death, a confirmed case of killing. Israel, in its own words from Israeli sources, killed on its own 42 prisoners of war so far inside of the Gaza Strip. That's what Israel confirms, by the way, that they were killed inside of Gaza. How? By some magic, by Israeli fire planes, by Israeli fighter jets, by Israeli bombs. And those who were released previously, well, they confirmed all of that. And some of them were about to die, like Noah Argamani said, and who criticized the Israeli media for trying to spin things. Israel implemented the Hannibal Directive on its population on the 7th of October in Ra'im, Nir Oz, Be'eri, and in the Nova Festival, clearly from the evidence. And they also implemented the Hannibal Directive on everyone who was captured and taken to Gaza during the 7th of October and after the 7th of October. And there is no other reason, really, where or other way you can interpret this because of the Israeli bombardment. Carpet bombing everywhere that every Israeli could be, therefore debunking this whole lie and propaganda that Israel actually cares about its prisoners of war inside of the Gaza Strip. And Hamas are now telling them, like they were telling them from the first day, that you're actually looking to kill all of them and get rid of that card or those cards that are being held by the Palestinian resistance. Now, Israel, in a surprising manner, now they aren't really declaring anything. They're not saying a word in Hebrew media inside of Israel. One source, English Israeli media, reported about this, but in general in Israel, that no one is speaking about this. Why? Well, because the streets are already fuming. People are protesting against Netanyahu, and people are calling to get to a deal. And the case of Aidan Alexander is very problematic because this case includes Donald Trump. Donald Trump was, meeting with the families of the Israeli prisoners of war, and he was negotiating with Hamas for the release of Aidan Alexander. Does Donald Trump really care about his, dual nationals? That's questionable. Why? Because, several Americans were killed by Israel. Israel killed an American national protesting for the Palestinians in the past year. Israel killed Rachel Corrie over 2 decades ago. They kill activists who are American. But these activists, you don't hear anything about it. The United States doesn't make any kind of noise when it's to do with its citizens being killed by Israel, like the United Kingdom, for example, and other countries too. The UK 3 aid workers were slaughtered deliberately, and they were also ex-armed forces in the UK, and not a word, as if nothing happens. When Israel kills them, if the other side kills them, no, they actually don't care. about their lives. Let's be honest here. The United States, it doesn't care about the lives of those who are being killed. Well, otherwise, why would they send their people as cannon fodder for these pointless wars, serving only the elite and the military-industrial complex? Why would they do that? Aidan Alexander is no exception, but Donald Trump does that because he's siding with Israel, and he has the Israeli lobby, and he wants to be viewed as someone who is actually working to release these people. Now, what can Donald Trump do after Hamas has such a declaration? Well, the straightforward thing that should be done by any country is to have direct criticism at Israel. Why? Because, well, they killed him. They broke the several ceasefires. They insisted on this genocide and bombardment, killing all of their people and over 50,000 Gazans, with 20,000 approximately missing, most of them children and women. And he allowed them to get away with all of this murder. They went against the deal that the United States was included in as a mediator and reports as a guarantor to. And Donald Trump allowed them, told the Gazans hell, and he was supporting Israel, butchering children, killing children in Gaza, left, right, and center. And now they had a strike, and bang, they killed their own again. And most likely it's purely deliberate, by the way. So Israel wants them dead because they consider them to be the toughest card in the hands of the Palestinian resistance, although that's even arguable. That's arguable because even if you get rid of all of them, you're still facing the people. You're still facing the resistance. However, Israel's main problem with the prisoners of war is the internal pressure. It's not their lives. They couldn't care less about them. Israel uses its population as cannon fodder. They brainwash them from a very young age with all of this propaganda and hate and racism, so they can go and die. And they don't really care about them. Does Benjamin Netanyahu care about the lives of anyone? If anyone had an ounce of brain, would they send their children for this genocide, for this barbaric genocide in Gaza? And we'll get to the escalation shortly with the more people now signing the letter. Over 11,000 now we have. Okay. What can Donald Trump do? Donald Trump will most likely fall into the propaganda of Israel. Knowingly or unknowingly, Donald Trump hasn't done anything significant to apply pressure on Israel, and he will blame Hamas, most likely. It would be surprising if Donald Trump goes ahead with a position that is very straightforward to criticize Israel, because we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen that publicly. Yes, we have seen in the recent meeting that he had with Benjamin Netanyahu that he said a few things that Netanyahu didn't really like, and he looked visibly, stressed to hear about, but he did not take a decisive action. He did not force Israel. And if he even gave Israel an ultimatum, we don't know about this ultimatum. So it's most likely not going to move the United States administration as much as it's going to move the Israeli public. Why? Well, number one, because Israel is hiding this report. Secondly, because they're already fuming, and it's proving the whole argument of those opposing Benjamin Netanyahu time after time. You are refusing a ceasefire, breaking a ceasefire, and you are getting our children killed, proving again and again the narrative and the argument of the Israeli opposition, who want to end this, get their people back. What they do with Hamas, what they do with the Palestinian cause is a separate story, but they want to end this and get it over and done with, and that's the majority. Now, is Aidan Alexander definitely killed? We haven't seen a case where Hamas said we lost contact of the group protecting this man, and they survived. Most likely, the group of fighters with him would have been killed, and he would have been killed too. It would be very, very unlikely that this man would come alive. And Hamas are publishing that now because, well, it happened. Well, we don't know exactly when it happened. Again, that's something that they would keep secret because, they wouldn't want to reveal too much information about the date, about the time, about the location, all of that. But there's clearly here a move from Israel to take down the rest of its prisoners of war inside of the Gaza Strip so that they can tell the Israeli public, well, they're dead anyway. So to remove that pressure from the Israeli public to end the genocide in Gaza and allow Benjamin Netanyahu to continue up until approximately October 2026, when the next Israeli election is going to come. And in the meantime, he can do whatever he wants. He can continue the war, continue primarily in Gaza, in other parts too, of course, because he needs to have multiple fronts open so that if he is somehow forced into, at any point, to stop a front, so he can have other fronts open. Why? So he can have an excuse to hide and run away from his court case, from justice inside of Israel, from the Supreme Court. And we have seen how many times he asked to not attend hearings in the Israeli courts, and he was allowed that. But why? Because he is technically the prime minister, and he is saying, well, I have an excuse. There's an emergency. I'm the prime minister. We're at a state of war. Israel is a state of emergency, and I need to take certain decisions. And in many cases, by the way, these would have been premeditated. They would have been pre-planned anyway. He would plan this decisive thing that he has to do and either require on the day or require in advance. But we have seen Netanyahu getting out of the court twice so far. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to continue to chase him, but that means that Netanyahu would still have an excuse to run away from justice in Israel. I mean, when we say justice in Israel, take that with a bucket or two of salt and 14 buckets of chili and pepper. So he's most likely dead. Donald Trump is most likely going to comply with Israel. He's not likely to do anything about that. The people who are most likely to do something are the Israelis. That's why Israel hasn't published this yet. Very, very tense. And in Israel, that's going to be very problematic. Now, moving on to the second thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Netanyahu, well, we've been talking about the letter. Again, I'm going to repeat the letter. And now, over 1,100,000. We started off with 1,000, went up to 1,500. Now you're talking about 11,000 soldiers, veterans, academics push Netanyahu to end the Gaza war, or more accurately, the Gaza genocide, signing various petitions demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the return of the Israeli captives. According to this report in Palestine Chronicle, they said these figures are based on publicly known initiatives reported by Israeli media and likely represent only a portion of a broader growing dissent within Israeli society, which is very accurate. Because if those who are publicly speaking now, going out saying outright, that's it, we are declaring dissent or declaring an outright refusal to serve in the army, something that was considered a taboo, then you're talking about something that's most likely much bigger than what we're seeing in front of our eyes. And this letter is based on the initial letter coming from the pilots in the Israeli Air Force, who stated that Netanyahu is pushing this war for his own interest. He's not putting this war for the security of Israel or for what they call the hostages, and there are innocent civilians being killed. That's what's happening. And now this is leading to what? This is leading to more problems with the army, with people going to the army. You already have over 50% refusal. In Israel, they're saying, at best we have 60 to 70% compliance. When they say at best, that means the average is even more than a half not complying with orders to serve in the army. Imagine a half of your army refusing to serve. Can someone grasp that? Can someone understand that? They're downplaying all of that. No, it's serious. It's very big. It's very important. And now it reached a level where the IDF chief of staff is telling Netanyahu the same thing. That's it. There's too much shortage. We can't have these ambitions of Benjamin Netanyahu being fulfilled inside of the Gaza Strip. That's it. Chief of staff told the political echelon, there is a great shortage of fighters. The ambition in Gaza cannot be realized this way, cannot be implemented, cannot be achieved. And he is basically telling Benjamin Netanyahu, we can't take this anymore publicly. And that's the chief of staff that came after Netanyahu forced the previous chief of staff, Herzi Halevi, to resign. This was assumed to be a man who would be more compliant with Netanyahu. Clearly, well, he's still a criminal. All of them are criminals. I mean, this is no whitewashing anyone here. But he is telling Benjamin Netanyahu the real picture. What's the real picture? We don't have enough reservists. We do not have enough reservists to fight. We cannot achieve any of the objectives of the war that you want. And we need to find a solution. We need to find a solution, meaning a political solution, not a solution based on a continuation of the war, based on what we've done so far. Why? Because we can't operate. Over 50% refusal. And I'm being very conservative when I say that, because in Israel, in multiple reports, they're saying the best type of compliance rate is between 60 to 70%. And you can take, again, that's something very, very unlikely, by the way, because 50% was like last year anyway. So we're almost in a state of the majority refusing to serve. Now, if we want to be, like, again, conservative, you'll say 50%. 50%, this state is established on its army. It's a state of an army. So they can't have this situation where over 50% are complying. And in these reports, and alongside the talks that are coming from the IDF chief of staff about outright not being able to achieve any of Benjamin Netanyahu's objectives in Gaza because of this shortage, and he's declaring that to the world, because of our shortage, we cannot achieve anything in Gaza. Everyone, who has any relevant experience in the field is telling Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, some people are criticizing the IDF chief of staff even with this statement, because they're telling him you're like a yes man for Benjamin Netanyahu, and you need to be more persistent than that. Now, he's trying to show that he has a level of independence, but what he's saying now is a reflection of reality. Finally, a reflection of reality that is being made public. This is something very big, that an IDF chief of staff says we cannot basically implement or achieve our objectives in Gaza because we have too much shortage. That is something very problematic for Israel, and it's very, very questionable how long Benjamin Netanyahu can continue down this genocide. And the more time goes by, the worse it gets for him internally. He might think to himself that he's making things more convenient for him by surrounding himself with yes men. But we all know what happens to the people who surround themselves with yes men who don't even give them an ounce of reflection and a reality check, especially during a war that they themselves consider to be an existential war.